Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a Cosmere themed video where I compare my personal feelings, where I would rank them versus the average ratings would rank them. There are of course so many things that factor into something's rating. For example, typically sequels are going to have higher ratings because the people that didn't like the first one, they drop off, and then the further you get into a series, the more you're likely just getting the fans. Either way, when I sat down and was writing out the average rating and then I put them in order, why is Dawnshard higher than the Hero of Ages? Excuse me. I'm gonna go through, this is all in good fun, and I'm not actually upset at anybody for liking one over the other. I would love to know your ranking if you've read all of these. I won't be going into spoilers. I'm gonna go through from 15 up until 1, 15 being the lowest, 1 being the highest, how the average ratings of all of these have them ranked, and then I'll go through my feelings for them. Down in the number 15 spot at 4.17, we have Elantris. Next up in the 14 spot, we have the Alloy of Law at 4.19. After that, we have Shadows of Self, which is the Mistborn Second Era book, which would be 4.26. Tied in the 11-12 spots, we have Warbreaker and Edge Dancer at 4.27. In the number 10 spot, we have the Well of Ascension at 4.35. In the number 9 spot, we have Mistborn Secret History, which is a novella. It is at 4.38. That one hurts me. I don't think that is better than Well of Ascension and Warbreaker. Number 8 spot, we have the third Second Era Mistborn book with the Bands of Mourning at 4.39. The number 7 spot, we have the Final Empire at 4.44. Number 6 spot, we have the Hero of Ages at 4.48. This is the third and final Mistborn Era 1 book. And the number 5 spot, we have Dawnshard, which is considered Stormlight Archive 3.5, meaning it's not 3.5 average rating. It's considered the third and a half book in the series. It's also a novella, and it's at 4.54 for its average rating. The number 4 spot, we have Oathbringer at 4.57. The number 3 spot, Way of Kings, 4.6. The number 2 spot, Rhythm of War, 4.62. And the number 1 spot, Words of Radiance, at a very impressive 4.73. That is just one of the highest average ratings I've ever seen, ever. My husband, who has read the first 3 Stormlight Archive books, would very much disagree. He does not care for Words of Radiance. It actually bothered him a lot. He likes Way of Kings the most. Anyway, my husband, this is not about his feelings.
I love you.
I want to just go through and do the same thing where I let you know my personal feelings from 15 up to 1 and kind of talk through the ratings, that the average ratings versus how I feel. So I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to reveal how I ranked them. I'm very back and forth. If I were to record this at a later date, I might feel very differently. There's just certain ones that I have a hard time putting above other ones. Since there was one tie with Warbreaker and Edge Dancer with the average ratings, I allowed myself to have one tie. At the very bottom, I have Secret History. I know that's an unpopular opinion. I do not like Secret History. Not that I think it's poorly written. I just cannot stand the scenes that we get in that story. No. In the number 14 spot, I have Edge Dancer. As you can see, not really a fan of novellas. Not the way that came out sounded weird. Novellas. Edge Dancer follows Lift. I'm not a fan of Lift. I don't really care for Lift. And it was funny because in a different video I mentioned not loving Lift, and someone commented like, imagine hating Lift. And I was like, I don't have to. In the number 13 spot, for a very similar reason, I have Dawnshard. They're fine. I actually didn't hate Dawnshard or anything like that. There are some on this list that there are moments in the books, because I love the Cosmere, right? It's no secret. There are moments in the books, some of them, that I'm like, ugh, such a drag. But then they'll have such awesome moments. And Dawnshard didn't have super awesome moments, and it didn't have moments that I was like, ugh. And it's so short that even if it did, it's easy enough to get through. I liked Dawnshard. I just don't love I just don't love novellas. From there, in the number 12 spot, I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember Second Era Mistborn as well, so I currently have Bands of Mourning. I have a reason why Bands of Mourning is the 12th spot. It's a spoiler. I can't get into it. There's just a trope that's used kind of sort of in this one, and I was annoyed by it. I didn't really care for a part in that one, and that's one of the only things that stood out to me significantly about Bands of Mourning is I remember being frustrated at that scene, which is the only reason. Of the 3 Second Era Mistborn books, it's at the lower end. Shadows of Self I have in the 11th spot. I just basically have them I remember that one scene frustrating me in Bands of Mourning. And then Shadows of Self, I just don't remember it that well. And then Alloy of Law I put at the top. And also I want to add, by top I mean of those 3. So Alloy of Law is in the 10 spot. I want to add, I don't find Wayne funny. I find him frustrating. So as the series goes on and we get more Wayne, the more I'm just like, this guy and his hats. He's like if Lopin, who I feel like everybody loves from Stormlight Archive, it's like if Lopin was a main character. I just, at some point, you're like, can you be a real person? You work as a very off-to-the-side character who maybe once gets a chapter or something, but he's too much of a cartoon for me. Anywho, moving on. Number 9 spot, I put Elantris. I like Elantris, but I just feel like a lot of Stormlight Archive and First Era Mistborn and Warbreaker are stronger. Oathbringer at 8. I know Stormlight fans, they argue all the time about the order that Stormlight Archive books should be ranked. Oathbringer, I actually debated whether I should have Elantris ahead of Oathbringer. Sorry. I love certain moments in Oathbringer. There's some really awesome moments, and there's a really hard-hitting, super sad scene in Oathbringer that, oh my gosh, it is so devastating, and you're like, gosh darn it, Sanderson, and I kind of figured it was coming, but even figuring it was coming when it came, I was just like, dang it. But the amount of a certain character Skyping people, as my husband would say.
I love you.
It's so, I'm like, really? This massive book, and we're spending all this time watching this character trying to find different ways to say the same thing to people. And it's not, I mean, Oathbringer is long. That's a long book. I know Rhythm of War is even longer. We'll get to that. But I know it's really long, right? And for me, I know Way of Kings is long, and I know there's certain parts of Way of Kings that are slower moving. All the Stormlight books are long. But Oathbringer, for me, could have been trimmed a little, you know? Like, the character who keeps trying to convince people of stuff could just have a scene where that character is trying to convince people, and then later have had they tried all these other ways to convince them, but nothing was working. I could just have a summary that is not going so well. And the reason I say that is because there's other parts with certain characters that I find very fascinating, where very in passing they would be like, and then those characters did a whole mission, and they're back now. And you don't see them do the mission at all. And I'm like, I wanted to see them go off and do that. Or certain characters would be like, guess what, guys? Here I am. And other characters would be like, oh, you're here? I mean, okay. And I see people reacting to this really big thing that just happened. But then also the backstory that's explored is great. In the number 7 spot, I have The Final Empire. I can just feel some people being hurt that I put The Final Empire above Oathbringer. I like The Final Empire. I think it's fun. I think it's a great way to introduce the story. I think it feels very, not that a first book in a series has to do this, but I just think it's very impressive that the story that Sanderson was able to tell in this one book, he did so many things in this one book, and he made you care about so many of the characters, and the stakes felt so high, and it just, I loved all these underdogs coming together to try to take on ultimate, just this impossible enemy, and it just seems like everything is against them, and I also love Vin. I like The Final Empire. It's not my favorite Cosmere book, but I did like it, and I think it's a great first book in a series. In the number 6 spot, I put Warbreaker. I know, once again, a lot of people are probably like, what? You put Warbreaker above the other things that I've put it above? Yeah, I did. I like Warbreaker. I think it's so much fun. It's a standalone. I know it might not stay a standalone. I know. But it's currently a standalone. And I think it's a solid book. I think it's one of the most exciting, fun Sanderson Cosmere books without being cartoonish the way that Wayne is cartoonish. It's a good time. It's got some funny moments. I like the various different characters throughout. I thought it was there's sort of a mystery aspect to it, and you're like, what's going on? What is this? And the magic is one of the most interesting, I think, to explore. I mean, Mistborn's magic system, I have a whole video comparing the Mistborn magic system to the Stormlight magic system. Mistborn is very, here's the magic, and then Stormlight, you're like, what is the magic? And then Warbreaker is like, here it is, but also it's a little confusing. And for some reason, it just pulls you in more, and it just seems like there's always something else to learn about the magic, and it's colorful and vibrant, and it's like levels. There's different levels to the magic, and I thought it was really fun. I like that story. And there's a lot of political intrigue, which I'm a big fan of. The last 5 were very difficult for me. I did put Words of Radiance in the 5 spot, which obviously goes against everybody else, apparently, because it's the number 1 spot based off of average ratings. I love Words of Radiance a lot. I think Words of Radiance is fantastic. The backstory that's explored is great. I think that a lot of our characters, their worlds are colliding, and I think that that's great as well. But I think my emotions belong to the top 4. So it was tough though. Like I said at the beginning of the video, on a different day, maybe I would feel different. Number 4 spot though, I had to put the Well of Ascension. There's just some, rereading it especially, there's just some scenes that hit me so hard. I almost cried rereading it. I think that this is such a hit or miss, obviously, because this is where what I was saying about how usually the later in a series you get, the higher the ratings go. This is the opposite. This has a lower rating than The Final Empire, but it's so political intrigue, siege type of tension in this story, and I loved it. I think there's just some really fantastic, like, yes moments where, you know, I say, you know, if you do know, you're like, yeah, but if you don't, you're like, okay. Number 3 spot. Okay, the top 3 were difficult, but I had to put Rhythm of War. I loved Rhythm of War. I think the super high rating, the 4.62, is purely because it is the 4th book in the Stormlight Archive series. I mean, you're asking a lot of people to not only read 3 huge books, but then to also read the side novellas too before you get to this one. And on top of all of that, at this point, you probably want to read the other Cosmere books so you understand a lot of what's happening in Rhythm of War. I get that a lot of people, the backstory part that's explored in this one, a lot of people weren't the biggest fan. It is, I think, the weakest. It's also the least amount of time I think we spend in a backstory. So for me, I'm like, I mean, there wasn't that much. But I completely understand if you just didn't really care for that spot. I also think it gets very science-y with the magic, and that also wasn't to everybody's liking. But I think that one thing I was concerned about with Oathbringer is it gets huge. It gets so big, especially like the stakes feel massive, and Rhythm of War I thought kind of brilliantly sort of pulled us back in and gave us a more intimate feeling. Like it felt like we were finally getting close to the characters again, which is something I felt like I missed a little bit with some of our characters in Oathbringer. And one character in particular, I was very happy took so much of the spotlight in Rhythm of War. And just interesting things are happening, and my heart hurt in a lot of moments. I was terrified for our characters in so many scenes. There are some scenes that I don't love. There's some moments I don't love, and if I were to read it again, I'm sure there'd be parts I'm like, oh, this part. But, you know, I really loved Rhythm of War. So currently, I have it in the number 3 spot, which means that the books that are tied are Way of Kings and The Hero of Ages. I could not pick one over the other. The Hero of Ages, to me, is one of the best conclusions. There are some people that hate the conclusion to Mistborn, but I love it so much. Way of Kings, to me, just has the best, oh my gosh, okay, Words of Radiance also has a fantastic, we talk about the Sanderlanches, right? I know, they're all fantastic, but the Way of Kings one, I was telling my mom, she's never gonna read these books. I was telling my mom about Way of Kings one day, and I was telling her all about the character of Kaladin, and then I was telling her about all these different characters and the way that different things come together at the end. I almost started crying telling her about it, and that's when I realized just how much that ending really hit me, because it's a long book, and it's a slow book. You're introducing this massive world, you're introducing all these characters, you're telling a character's backstory, you have all these interludes that you're like, what are these? What am I reading? But the last 200 pages of that book are just, oh my gosh, they grab your heart, and they turn your stomach upside down. You're so worried for your characters, but it's just so amazing. The end of Way of Kings is so good. So that's why. It was a lot of fun, and I hope it was fun for you. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. I'll have my Stormlight Archive and Sanderson videos linked in the description bar down below if you would like to see more. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later. Bye.